conflict, its resolutions are forgiven. Now, this seems pretty obscure. And after a day like today, I would have titled it something more to the effect of conflict, it sucks. I also got told conflict, real or imagined, when I was thinking about doing an article related to conflict. These are the stories we tell ourselves when we're going into the vision of I love who I am for who I am, and others are in that same boat. They're in that same wisdom of I get to love who I am, or I love who I am. Not I get to. I'm already there. They're already there. This is the nature of it. So what happens is when we have conflict on the rise in our minds, we often feel defensive or defended by others, correct? We have so many souls on this plane who are in this idea that I must defend others against who I am. That's where Brenda is. Sometimes. I'm going to make sure that someone else's soul doesn't get battered and bruised in the mind in order to see it for what it is. It's a laying down of arms, right? This is where people are talking about the nature of conflict on a level that is so horrific for some that they cross themselves over, right? That's the nature of what many don't want to talk about. All of that is forgiven. There are no souls that go over to the other side of the veil without anyone there to guide them. It's about who you choose to align with, is what some will say. Not understanding that as soon as we cross over, we go through a process of forgiveness for all of our hearts. That's the nature of what it is. And then there are those souls who will say, well, then I get a choice on whether or not I want to create with you or not. It goes against my belief system that I'm off the hook. That's what many are afraid of, that people are just being let off the hook for whatever crimes of humanity or whatever torturous visions people have gone under. I had to do certain visions in my mind that held me accountable for what? Crimes against humanity? What have I done against humanity other than reveal the true source of wisdom that many think they're creating with? You see, when we align with the nature that we are souls and we're multidimensional, we start to understand the nature of those lower planes of development that we often can reside in. And those can be the hard hitters of soul that come through and say, I beat you in the mind. And that's what Brenda received from certain souls. Not in the way that many people would think, like it was made up, but literally, I created a situation where someone else came at me in the form of their wisdom for who they were in the moment and told me what they thought of me and of my guidance and of my soul, not knowing nearly enough to make a value judgment as harsh and critiqued as that, but that's the nature of who I am. Knowing that the majority of the people on this plane have no idea what they're creating. No man gets put asunder is where I go for the most part. I often see people who align with various sources of wisdom who are being determined to be less than in their, it's like their implications are there, that they are not as aligned with the wisdom of who they are, correct? No. The wisdom is inherent. It's about whether or not we choose to align with those souls who understand that poverty is an outcome for some of us. This is where so many of those messages of old come in, saying that we're not supposed to, quote, profit from our wisdom. And yet, isn't that what every single soul on this plane is striving to do in essence, whether or not you go through the traditional channels of career development versus I'm a politician who's honoring her opinions of me, right? This is the nature of where Brenda creates the conflict with, she says she's going to be a senator at some point, but it's Marjorie Taylor Greene. And Brenda doesn't align with her in the mind as someone that I would support in the voting booth. Let's put it that way. And that's a free and clear vision. First of all, she's not in my district. But it's the nature of when I go through this process on a soul level, we have to see eye to eye, don't we? Not even close. I agree to disagree with her methods of attaining information about certain topics or her implications of what her opinions are saying to me. And I understand it. I understand if I was her and I had the information that she had or the information that she was lacking, she would be feeling the same way. It's an understanding of where we are as souls. However, when I go to the nature of my own personal relationships that are in the here and the now versus someone that I've seen on the screen, okay, it's a very different interpretation about what kind of process we may go through on the other side of the veil versus those of us who are doing the work here on this plane. And it can be felt as work, and I would be denying it wholeheartedly is where some souls are. They're free and clear of the conflict because they've bypassed the nature of, I don't have to align with everyone. I just align with a certain vibration. And then that vibration is what brings me the beauty of who I am. What I've done is to embody the wisdom of my own soul. But I also have decided to give guidance to others through their own visions of what they themselves are creating and who they are creating with. And some of those souls create havoc on this plane for my own soul, in essence, right? This is the nature of us living our lives in peace and harmony, right? How many of us know we create conflict often when there isn't a need to create the conflict in the first place? This is why Brenda was here in so many ways saying this is so unnecessary. She sees a lot of the conflict of the world unnecessary. It's drama, right? Others would say there are terrorists aboard her soul. She knows how to deal those death blows to those who in essence are saying, I'm of a terrorist vision and I'm here to do some damage. She doesn't even buy into the nature, because what happens is when you cross over, you don't leave all of the visions behind. You have an understanding of who you are as a soul, but you don't have the identifications as such, as much as you do my family, my friends, my loved ones. Because in essence, very few just created from this identity as I'm a terrorist versus I was seeking justice for those that I aligned with. How many people understand that nature? So these are the identities that people are working with. I love who I am, set me free is where Brenda was with certain family members. And she created havoc with one soul that was travesty for her, but it was wisdom in his mind for his soul as well. He claims it was her wisdom that brought her to this session, which is about the nature of conflict, real or imagined. But in essence, it's the nature of the resolutions of the conflict. And people will say, what does that mean they are forgiven? Because in essence, many of the times we have a resolution in conflict, it's like a deceit on who it is that's in charge. Her soul is saying, we're going with what my soul told me we're going to be talking about, versus someone else's soul that says, I want to be a part of this vision. And she's saying, When we think on this plane that there is a winner and a loser of conflict, that's when some of those ideas of all of those resolutions that are then somehow aligning with the idea that other people are getting hurt or being treated as less than or somehow losing out, those go away for the most part. Okay? Those are typically battles of, fame and fortune or wisdom or whatnot, right? Many are saying that the true battles that we often have to create are so that we can solve a problem. So a lot of times we solve problems by creating them. Does that make sense to people? This is Brenda's cherished soul that knows how to do the work to unwind most of the people's idea about what it is to create conflict. And of course, people are not instrumental in the changes of Mother Nature, but that is part of what we see happening in essence, is if we need to create technology, then we will find the problems in order to create the solutions often. Now, others are saying we notice the problems. We create more and more problems so that we can find solutions. This is like technological advancement 101. How many people understand with every new bit of technology there tends to become some sort of obstacle or an illusion of an obstacle that we then can say, let's enhance this vision. So it's not about degrading technology or degrading the idea that conflict is healthy for us. You see, this one hates conflict. I hate conflict so much I can't even tell you. It drives me bananas because usually I already know what it's about and I know how to unwind it. Usually it could be a personality conflict, and then I say to myself, given where they are in their field of vision and with what they know, it doesn't surprise me one bit that they have an issue with who I am. I'm threatening to their sense of values is often where people go. I'm here to unwind the vision of those who think the INFJ mindsets are somehow less than those who are of the highest of the highs, right? We're not going to go into that vision. But what I'm going to say is that this is one of those identities that I still carry with me in my heart, because in essence, it has helped me to align with some of the most remotely popular people, right? It's not about popularity. It's about understanding how to handle the conflict that we create often in our hearts. Sometimes we are here to save others is where some of us go. We want to be those Christ souls, right? Or the Christ saviors, right? Those are those ideas of I'm here to what? Help. If I want to help people, this is what Brenda was hearing in the business world of soul and course creation and everything. Let's let people know where they have their problems. We need them to know the problems that they've got that they don't realize they have. It's like anti-ethical, and that's not the right word, and she knows it, to her own vision, which is to spiral us up out of the nature that life is just problems waiting to be solved. If there's an issue she goes through during this process, it's going to be revealed, but it's not with the intention of telling people you're going to have the same issues that I do, because I can create havoc for my family because of what I do in my stomach. I'm getting the vision of my gut. People are starting to understand why the integrity is often deceived in the vision of business development. So mine has been hampered in essence because there's a conflict that I have in my mind. It's an internal conflict of sabotage of certain business ideals, because in essence, the promotion of videos is going to go sky high for those that say, I need to know how to make money. And yet the vision is not at the expense of my integrity, of trying to create a problem where one doesn't exist. This is the nature of what society keeps telling us, versus the beauty of who I am that says you're beautiful where you are, no matter what, no matter how you express, and no matter how, quote, evil you are in your vision. Because in essence, that's what so many people are getting told by others who do the work that I do, which is trying to free us from the nature of what that really, truly embodies for people. Usually it's just a static vision of, oh yeah, that's who they are in my mind. Not knowing that in essence, the reflection back to them is often just the same. Okay? And it's understood, very much so, that most often people who are in extreme amounts of pain and misfortune are often the first ones to label people as evil, correct? That created a conflict for me in my heart because of what I myself was told based on the visions of where I was in my own level of soul leveling up. When you vibrate in the beauty of soul, you often don't hear the negativity as much unless you are creating problems from some other realm that doesn't quite resonate. And for me, sometimes it was in this idea of the authentic Brenda doesn't create the problems for people as much as she thinks. Create more problems, Brenda, for people to solve, right? And she's like, how about we just work with the nature of creating a beautiful place for all of us to reside on? And what does that take really? Does it take me taking the blunt blows of others who want to have their wisdom like dispelled to the masses? There's something about that. It's more about the nature of understanding who we are in each and every moment, knowing I have a choice to agree or disagree with my soul's vision of who I am. I don't have to take on every soul vision I've ever created and try to somehow justify it to anybody else. I was a bad girl in certain visions, right? How many of us got labeled various things, either by our family, our friends, teachers, society, or whatnot? I've had those moments of it. And then others would say, but that's a good thing for certain people, right? What I do in my own free time is mine, and yet, this is an and yet, we fear the unknown most often. And with Brenda, she has her moments of the fear of it, and she strikes out with certain souls who say, I want to come through with my wisdom. And she has said to herself, there are only certain souls who qualify for the vision of public disclosure. Okay? She's not here to get into the nature of the conflicts with her and her family very much. You might hear about it here and there on Facebook or something like that. But when it comes to YouTube, you're going to get the real deal of soul. Now, what that means is it's not always going to be about a celebrity or some other person of fame or notoriety or anything. Woodrow Wilson was one of those souls that I was honoring, and he was saying that we honor all our presidents as much as we would anyone else. You see, in essence, Brenda was being told the presidents have an honor that is all their own. And in essence, it's more like they have the protection of the wisdom when they cross over, not to hear every destructive vision that they've ever had to create with from every soul who's ever been affected by their wisdom. Do you see how that would be incredibly torturous for most at this point? We rise out of the need to even vibrate in this field of vision. So when people come through with that idea, they say, oh, thank God, right? I'm not affected by most people who I run across with. But there is an energy field of love that is always there. I sometimes cuss people out, right? Very rarely, but I hear about it every so often because in essence I create with some of those souls who do that vision. And it's uncomfortable for me in certain ways, but it's also an understanding of how many people know that they do so in their minds even if they don't portray it on the screen. I have my own, moments of it. So, why do people assume that the public Brenda versus the private Brenda is going to somehow be different? Do you not understand the nature of wanting to have our private moments of reflection? This is who I am, and this is what can help us resolve the conflicts that we are creating. And that's why for her, in her mind, she was saying, just give me the time to work through the conflict and it'll have a resolution. And often in our hearts, we say that to ourselves. This is something that will go away, right? Unless it doesn't. Or if it's a pattern, then we might have to deal with it. But from the perspective of soul, as I am, embodied by soul, as soul, okay? It means that we all have our choices to make about what level of understanding we want to go to in order to free ourselves from the pain and torture of it. That's what others are experiencing, the pain and torture of soul vision, which is a very different kind of embodiment. So if you decide I want to create with people who hate me, as many do on the screen, because in essence they've opened up their hearts to the nature of many, and many are just going along, just blasting everyone else, thinking that there's nothing wrong with that. I'm expressing my heart in the way that I want to. It's your mind, but we understand the nature of the freedom of expression, the freedom to be, and the freedom to expose ourselves for who we think we are on the inside. You're more than your words. I can guarantee you that. And this is the nature of why my soul comes through and will give you the subconscious visions that are also at play with you and your soulmates, or you and your friends, or you and your family. And that can be a doozy to realize when we're at this level, what are people truly creating with us? And it's not a fear factor vision, but we could go there. People are like, really? You get some of those visions? Absolutely. This is the nature of why people are not hitting those high notes with the law of attraction, or with that idea of I'm going to manifest whatever I just imagine in my, in my dream state, or I'm going to place a vision and it just comes to me. Your mind is your magic. But many don't realize the amount of thoughts that go into the negative of who they are versus the positive of who they are, or the, yes, I'm so badass, I can handle anything that comes my way. And yet I can't. I have to put on an identity sometimes to handle the influx of negativity from certain souls that I have dealt with in my past. And it's because I created a lot of havoc with them. Once I put on my INFJ Brenda hat, it means all bets are off. Go ahead and try your best to unwind the visions of who I've got on board and on my side. That's when people would be cheering because they know Woodrow Wilson was one of those souls identified as such, not necessarily classified as such. There's a difference. You see, it was never part of any testing or anything like that. These are very, very few people that now understand the nature of what some identities will do. And this is what Brenda wanted to be honest about, which was the idea of, I don't take everything off and say I'm nothing. That's one of those other kinds of spiritual enlightenment visions where I'm just who I am and I don't identify with anything, and then we're walking around in the illusion and we're just reflecting each other. Bullshit. We have the options now to create from various fields of love. So it's not just here. When we open up to the nature of now I'm with my soul, I know now that in essence a lot of the stuff that we create havoc with is an illusion of control, or an illusion of desire, or an illusion, right? Versus I'm in this place of I lack versus I desire. And desire is always there because it's our impulse to keep creating. Okay? So how does this deal with conflict? Conflict in its simplest forms is disagreement. But it has no resolution, is what some people say. And that's what they want people to understand, is that they are all forgiven already when others have crossed over. It has no difference what Bible you use, what vision of love you use. And I understand that there are some people who are going to say, I work with souls who are stuck. What happens is we create with what we envision. So when I say that, it's because I've spiraled myself up to a place where I don't even bother souls who are choosing to cause problems on the soul level. Not here. And I can tell you right now, the souls are all beautiful. If you're expecting bad stuff, you may in fact create bad stuff. I've had my moments of it. It was my own soul coming back to me, giving me what I expected to create with. A hardcore soul that likes to cuss people out. That's one of them. That was not easy. Okay? So we have to keep reminding ourselves that once those souls are in the vision of I'm with souls that love me, right? No, it doesn't even have to be that. It's not just about your family. This is why so many people are so afraid to create with others, because they think that somehow their portrayal of who they are here is who they are on the other side of the veil, or even what their highest vision is. And this is the difference between I traverse the realms of soul, all the way down into those, devilish duties or whatnot, versus I've never even considered anyone less than that walked on this plane, and I don't really deal with any other types of beings other than the ones that I understand are here of a benevolent nature, at the minimum. So why would I be afraid of creating with anything that's already within my reach? I'm in the heavenly realms when I'm with my own soul, creating from that vision that I love who I am and I love you too. Whether or not you understand it as such is a different story, because I'm not going to just be here to say, I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you, as some do. I'm more of the, let's get it on. Let's get this party going. Let's understand what it's like to create from a place of, I love who I am and I'm not afraid of the afterlife. Because that's who I am. Okay? And that's what I want for all of you. And this is why some of those vibrations or those sources of wisdom are kind of going by the wayside. I love it. Set me free. Right? That's the nature of where some of it goes, because in essence I was creating with the negativity of a certain book that was vibrating very high in one section and very low in another, right? It has its own vibration depending on where you were creating from in your moment. So it's not like I walk around saying, I am a blank all the time. I am soul. But my name is Brenda, and I still get to create with that. My own soul admires the Seth soul is one of those higher visions that many would be wise to avoid, is what some would say. but it's truly an honest, open, accessible way to see the expansiveness of the technicalities of who we are as soul. And if you're afraid and you've had a lot of trauma and all of that, right? I don't reinforce my trauma. When I have, and I did recently within the last 6 months or so, it kicked me in the butt. I thought I had it all under the rug, right? I was forced to recreate it, and it created so much conflict on the soul level that I was getting handed it back from various tribal visions as well, saying, we honor you, but you are against us. And I'm more like, I want to be free to be me. I want to be free to have fun. I want to be free to have my reactions. If I have a reaction, it sucks. Because in essence, I already know how to play with the vibrations of certain systems. But in the end, instead of putting a wall around my heart, which is what I had to do at one point, I tried to break free of that vision of I'm open to any and all, but it's open to any and all from the vibrations that I reside in, not who they are on this plane that is somehow thinking that that's what I'm going to be receiving. I know how to do that work. It's not pleasant. That's why you want to keep yourself high. So with that, I want to reinforce the idea that you are all free and clear to go ahead in your own soul's wisdom of love. Every day your soul is cheering you on, whether you know it or not, because we are here doing beautiful works of wisdom, whether they are in book form, highlighted in comment section, or portrayed across the screen. That's my soul, my own vision. I am the badass one. I know what I'm doing. That's one aspect of me that I don't highlight very often because in essence, it can sound somewhat arrogant. But others are saying it's the beauty of you when you are in your moments. But I don't portray it as saying that. It's just the idea of knowing my strengths and having embodied a lot of inner knowing, wisdom, and strength in who I am as soul. And is just as being me here on this plane. I know what I know is one of my friend's most famous phrases that kind of gets turned on its heels a little bit once, I was bringing through soul level information, and then you realize, there's a lot more going on. But we are honing our intuition. We are honing that vision. And so if you have some conflict with me or my wisdom, I would say, I honor it. I understand. We have different levels of understanding based on where we are. And that's all beautiful. If I give you a soul session, it comes through with who you are on this plane, but from a higher level of understanding that's compassionate and wise and truthful. You can trust it, that it's going to make sense for you. You can trust that your wisdom will always be held within. But how many of us are not either able to do that work or we have no desire to do that work? It could be that I just want a simple solution to a simple problem that seems to be getting me stumped. Okay? So with that, I want to say thank you for watching. Remember to like, follow, or subscribe, depending on which format you're watching this video. And as always, remember, stay curious, wise, and soulful. Have a wonderful day.